Uh, Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this panel discussion on Iran, hosted here in Washington, D.C. by the Global Policy Institute and Bay Atlantic University. My name is Paolo von Schirach, and I'm privileged to serve as the president of the Global Policy Institute, a nonpartisan research institution in downtown Washington, tied to, connected with, and cooperating with Bay Atlantic University. I also serve as the chair of political science and international relations at Bay Atlantic University. So today, our goal is to try to shed some light on the admittedly extremely complicated issue of Iran and try to see if we can find some common ground among our distinguished panelists who join us from Europe and different countries in Europe, Italy, France, Turkey, and of course our own associate GPI fellow and faculty member, Fazle, who has been a student of Iran for many, many years. So hopefully, if we try together, we may identify maybe a better way to deal with this Iran conundrum. Years ago, the international community thought it had found a way, which was this big compromise agreement that essentially, I think we can all agree, as a minimum, restrained and constrained the existing Iran nuclear program. And the subtext, not part of the deal, let's be clear, was, at least here in Washington, but in other capitals probably the same, that by creating a more relaxed and somewhat less stressful atmosphere between Iran and key Western countries, that this might contribute to the lessening of tensions in the region. Notably, that Iran would tone down what is perceived, rightly or wrongly, certainly here in Washington, as an aggressive behavior in the region, the list is long. Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, etc., etc. So that finally, eventually, at some point, Iran would become, quote, a normal country. Of course, all that came to an end with the Trump presidency and Mr. Trump's idea that this deal was bad, was terrible, and that America had to get out of it as soon as possible, which it did eventually. And now and then it reverted to a policy, quote, of maximum pressure. Now we're several years into this new approach. And quite frankly, it's hard to see what it has accomplished, to be honest with you. That's my own interpretation, but obviously I want to hear from you. So why don't we just start with this? Fazle, let me start with you as you are here in Washington. Give us your quick reading, as succinctly as you can, of the sanctions policy of the Trump administration, and what did it bring?
Thank you, Paolo, for having me, and let me try to be very specific to answering your question. So, assessing whether there's a better way to understand this with sanctions in mind, you have to keep in context with the fact of, on one side, there was this emphasis of containing Iran, and another in fear of whether it could be containable. There has been success in containing Iran in the US economic embargo. Iran's unemployment is staggeringly high, at present at 11.38%. It is currently, the currency, the rial, has devalued so badly that in August 2019, Iran's central bank had to slash 4 zeros to prop up the value. Inflation is high at 41.06% as of last year. It has creeped up to, I believe, 47% now. Oil sales are determined by world markets, which hasn't helped Iran. It needs much more than the $40 per barrel to get at least a surplus in its budget. Rouhani's government has tried to diversify away from the hydrocarbon economy. It has incentivized schemes to expand the private sector, but wealthy Iranians continue to invest elsewhere. and the private sector is simply unable to meet such expectations given the natural IRGC interference. So where Iran has been able to be contained is in what we know as the arms embargo that is now extended beyond October 18th. It has a double-edged kind of a setting. On one side, you see a reduction of activities, but you also see an expansion of its activities in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. Ban on uranium enrichment and processing. In one sense, it looks like it's working, but when IAEA says that Iran is actually cooperating, but this kind of cooperation is Iran's version of cooperation, not necessarily that of the Trump administration's predilection. There's a ban in place on testing of ballistic missiles and transfer of nuclear technology, and there's a component of missile development. All certainly hasn't worked because testing continues in undisclosed locations. There is the incident of the launching of the Khorramshahr missile in 2017, which has a range of roughly about 1,200 miles, was seen and endorsed by President Rouhani as a deterrent. Now, this has actually taken even a more drastic shape after the withdrawal of the JCPOA in May 2018. The regime is actually expanded its activity on detention of citizens of the West of Iranian origin, primarily the famous Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe, and they're held essentially in a format of ransom.
Sorry, can I just stop you there for a moment? Let's get to the real point, Fazle. The objective of maximum pressure was to force behavioral change in Tehran. Has that been accomplished? Are we forcing? Are the Iranians say, okay, sorry, enough, we can't take this anymore. Let's sit down and find another deal that would be to the satisfaction of Washington. That's not happened, right? Is it going to happen
short answer
on this premises? No.
No.
Okay. Well, so essentially, while you, as you described with a great deal of detail, while the Iranian economy is really suffering a great deal, the country is not, at least at the moment, not on its knees. It's not saying, oh my God, we're done, we're finished, we have to do something, right? We're not there at the moment, at least.
No, so let me expand just by a little bit on that front. So there is, the state has non-sanctionable off-the-book assets. They have leverage, but during even this time of the pandemic, they have prioritized internal security and regional security, and not on humanitarian efforts.
Okay. Let me just switch to the other panelists here. Arzu, how do you, from Turkey, from your perspective and as an observer of Iran affairs, how do you view all this? How do you assess the, whether you agree or disagree with the sanctions? That's a different story. But from your perspective, have the sanctions been effective? Have they accomplished anything?
Well, in my point of view, sanctions are never work, actually. If you are talking about the sanctions in Iranian nuclear crisis, the just period of time that the sanctions was successful was the time before JCPOA, because both the United States, the EU, and Russia and China was intact, and within the framework of the United Nations Security Council, all together worked coherently. And they convinced the Iranian government to come to the table and sign this Iranian deal. Actually, this was the time that, for the first time ever, the sanctions was successful on the Iranian nuclear crisis. When we look to the Iran has been sanctioned for more than 40 years, and they know how to live with this. And on the other hand, Iran has the oil. And when you have oil, you will always have some black markets. And when you have this strategic card, you will always have the chance to securing out the sanctions. And the Iranian government, for its survival, know how to cope with this. More sanctions? No, I don't think that the sanctions are fruitful. They're just pressuring on the Iranian people, not the Iranian government, because now we have black markets and this money running somehow, and don't know that who sells what to who and where this money goes. So just the Iranian economy is under the pressure and people feel the extremely negative effects of that sanctions. But if you are talking about the behavior change of the government, no, nothing has been changed. Again, we have the same thing that the United States has complained for more than several years. So sanctioning Iran doesn't work. I mean, if you are sanctioning Iran to make the Iranian people uprising, it doesn't, again, fruitful, because they don't have the leader, they don't have the gun, they don't have the power. So Iranian government can surpass them, and they are not in a position to say, object to the government. And another reality here is that we saw it in the history many times. While the foreign intervention inside the Iran happens, all the people in the Iran come together and make a cement effect in the Iranian society. So I think that with regard to Iranian issues, regarding the Iranian nuclear program, this issue is not just the technical Iranian nuclear program. And now we know this after the Trump's new strategy. And you have to come back to the table and saying that, okay, we are back on the table and we are eliminating some of the sanctions, but you have to do something in your behavior, and you have to negotiate it on the table, not outside of the table. Those kind of things just are negative effects on the Iranian policies. Now in the Iran, the hardliners are more stronger than ever. And I'm sure that even after the American elections, even the Biden government will be on its duties, that the hardliners will be in power in Iran, and the Iran will not be the same Iran that he used to deal 10 years ago. Okay.
Michel, Makinsky, give us your perspective. I know we had, we talked about this just a few days ago informally. How is France and other European countries that you're familiar with, how are they coping? How are they coping to try to maintain some semblance of normalcy, with Iran under the cloud of sanctions? How is that working? And first of all, I asked the same question I asked everybody else, and I will ask Professor Redaelli too. Has anything really worked according to the will of the administration in Washington? That's the first question. Yes or no? That's an easy one.
Answer is clear, it's no. And I concur with what has just been said by Arzu. I would add 2 or 3 things. First of all, we are focusing on Trump. We should not forget the fact that during Obama's term, JCPOA has not been properly implemented by the United States. In particular, even if formally banking sanctions were withdrawn or suspended, in fact, this did not work. And there is, coming back to now, there is an enormous frustration from the Iranian side. If they agree to go to the table, they will ask, if you are saying, Mr. Biden or even Mr. Trump, we are going back to the JCPOA, fine, but do implement it. And we Iranians think that we have been kidded, because in spite of formal statements, OFAC was jeopardizing transactions, threatening banks, firms, and so on. So the first request from the Iranian side for going to the table will be, if we come back to JCPOA, please confirm that you will implement it, actually not verbally. France, and your second question, there are very few transactions. You have heard about the Instax system, which has been launched by the E3. In fact, after a first transaction, it is currently not working. You have been aware as well of a Swiss system, Swiss channel, which has been launched by Americans with the Swiss, in particular with the Swiss bank. There has been a first preliminary transaction with the Swiss laboratory and Novartis. It may work. It is possible that it will work, but conditions are, it is open to Swiss subsidiaries of foreign firms, including American. And my guess is that it was launched in order to allow US laboratories which already trade with Iran. When you go to Iran and you ask some people, they confirm there are US transactions with pharmaceutical laboratories. So it is the purpose of this Swiss channel is first to ease transactions with both subsidiary of US laboratory and with some Swiss firms as a reward for good Swiss services to American diplomacy. This remains very limited. Outside this, there are unofficial channels. Some companies are trying to trade only in non-sanctioned sectors, agriculture and food on one hand, and medicine. These are very limited transactions, but there are some. And at the end of the day, we know that there is an intense trade between Iran and its neighbors through various channels. We have quoted Turkey, but there are Iraq, there is with India, Malaysia, Pakistan, and some others with systems which are similar to Instax, but not built according to the same scheme. And as Arzu told us, there is an enormous black market according to the old recipes which were launched during the Ahmadinejad presidency.
Well, thank you. Riccardo Redaelli, to you the task of putting all this together again, and maybe you can add other dimensions in terms of whether the sanctions have worked, but also what is the state of mind of the Iranian society now, living again in this atmosphere of quote extreme pressure, or whatever it's called, by whatever the definition by Secretary Pompeo. How is this working, and how do the Iranians view their future in this complicated environment?
Yeah, thanks, Paolo. I don't want to play the annoying role of being a professor, so answering with another question to your question. But the problem is, sanctions, the idea of containment. I never properly understood what Americans, and especially what this administration means with containment. Because if, the problem is that the Trump administration, but not only the Congress, the Senate, the representative, they are looking since many years Iran only through Sunni, Arab Sunni and Israeli eyes. So the image they have of Iran is distorted. And my idea is, if you use the maximum pressure, you got back the maximum resistance. But sanctions were directed to contain Iran, or to regime change, because in Pompeo, Mr. Bolton, Mr. Pompeo, and sector of the Trump administration, the idea was not to contain Iran, but to destroy, to the regime change, to make the Islamic Republic of Iran collapse. And I remember, as I told you, I joined several, for many years, since many years, track to meetings. And I remember what one of the leader of the passed around of the IRCG told me, why we are negotiating, why we are speaking informally? If it is for reaching an agreement, a compromise, we sit and discuss. But if you want to crush us, if you want regime change, there is nothing to discuss. So that's the point. It's not clear what Washington wants. And the problem of Washington is just looking to Iran via the Sunni Israeli eyes. So that is unbalancing our vision and our policy. To say that sanctions bites a lot, but that will not crush the regime. On the contrary, they are supporting the worst part, the worst sectors of the regime. Anytime since 1997, when I was working in Iran, and there were the reformist period, anytime Iranian conservatives, anytime the Iranian radicals were on the defense, were under pressure, Washington always made the wrong decision, supporting them indirectly and weakening the reformists. You know, in Iran, the regime is extremely unpopular because it failed from an economic point of view, because it's illiberal, it's corrupted, because the young, if you speak with the young Iranians, are probably the most pro-Western of the Middle East. They want to have music, having fun. So they dislike, the vast majority of the Iranians dislike the regime. But of course, with this policy, you just force, and my colleagues, they already told that, you put them in a corner, they have no other alternatives. So when we say what the Iranians think is which part of Iran you're thinking, which sector of a very fragmented Iran we are thinking. But the more you put pressure and the more you oblige them to stay united, despite their unwillingness. Maximum pressure is the most wrong possible policy with Iran, if you wish to moderate Tehran. And my impression then, Iranians are beyond hope. I remember what an Iranian told me recently. Even if there is a Biden president, then I'm concluding, it's extremely difficult to put the toothpaste back into the tube once you are squeezed. So even Biden, which was less friendly with Tehran than President Obama, it would be extremely difficult for Mr. Biden to revert, to put the toothpaste back into the
Indeed. Well, thank you for that. But so let's try to move on here. Michel, I don't see your image. I don't know, something happened. Your video is off. Michel, Makinsky, can you, I don't see your video. Maybe you can turn it on again. I don't know. Okay, but let's
yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we're all here. Fazle, back to you. I think there's a bit of a consensus here on this panel that this policy, whatever its intentions, putting pressure and/or, as Riccardo just mentioned, regime change, that via pressures you would exert so much pressure on the economy, on everything, that the pot will boil over and there will be some kind of an insurrection and that will topple the Ayatollah regime, and that will be fantastic because we start again. So that's not happening. And as Riccardo said, there's no, and also Arzu, I think, mentioned that the regime is too strong for this and the opposition too fragmented and disunited. So again, what are we going to do that is more productive? What are the avenues ahead? And indeed, considering that it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube once it's all out, is there a better way that is also not idealistic but pragmatic? Whoever is elected president on November 3rd here in Washington, can we do something that tones down the tensions and engage Iran in a way that is agreeable to everybody? Is that possible, or is that just a dream? Fazle.
Well, it's kind of, I mean, the window of opportunity existed in the JCPOA, and then now that window has shrunk. I
think we lost. Fazle, your audio is off.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So what I was saying was that the window of opportunity has lapsed, and right now you're really working at a very narrow angle to expand that opportunity. I just don't think it's possible because, you know, let's say, for instance, Biden does become president. He has about 4 months to make something out of this, which is impractical given the fact that on May 2021, Iranians are going to go to their election booths, and there's overwhelming evidence that more hardliners are going to creep into the leadership of not just the presidency, but also the parliament. And this is not just hardline, but IRGC hardline, which is really much more confrontational than previous dialogues would have you believe. So to answer your question accurately, the window is very, very limited.
Well, Arzu, from a Turkish perspective, or at least based on where you are in Ankara and looking at the region, is there anything that you can see that could be constructively done? And could Turkey play, given its rather unique relationship with Iran, at least as compared to the United States and as compared to Europe, do you envisage some kind of a path towards a more relaxed environment here? Arzu.
Yeah, well, always there's a way, actually. In the Iranian nuclear crisis, we lost a lot of time during the Bush governments. We were talking about the Iranian nuclear crisis, but nothing was negotiated by the United States in order to solve the problem, because we have preconditions. Even we couldn't find the way to open a negotiation. So we lost the time, and those were the years that Iran developed its nuclear program and come to a threshold that everybody now are frightened that it has the capacity to build a nuclear bomb, right? Those were the lost years. And now we have one thing in hand, which is, I think, JCPOA is a really good agreement because all of the P5+1 and the United States are on the table, and they finally convinced Iran to sit on the table and doing something. And actually, by this agreement, they managed to restrict Iran's nuclear program to the minimum extent. And this was important, really. From now on, I think that we have to do something to find a way between the Obama's policy and the Trump's policy, because on both sides, both the United States and the Iranian sides, we have both moderates and hawks. So we have to find a midway in that manner. And what are the concerns? The concerns are restricting Iran to not build a nuclear bomb, right? This is the first one. We can manage this by the current agreement, okay? The other concern is the Iranians' activities and behavior in the region. So in that manner, we can ask Iranians to sit on the table and finally do something regarding to those concerns. But while doing this, we cannot just punishing Iran. I mean, the time passed. As the Riccardo is saying, we cannot put the toothpaste again in the tube. And now the hardliners are so strong in the Iran. And the coercive diplomacy, especially the one which is more stronger sanctions and even the military attack rumors, those are not working because we have to find a midway here Turkey did it in the past. If you remember, with Brazil, Turkey made this Tehran declaration, and actually Turkey faced a lot of criticism from the United States part, saying that, why did you interfere in that? And the United States was not happy with that initiative. But I'm sure that Turkey will be ready to do what has to be done, because one of the countries that be more affected from the even nuclear sanctions, I mean the sanctions that will be applied on the Iran, or a military confrontation on the Iran. Since we have border with Iran, Turkey is one of the most critical countries that will be affected. So in the sake of a better and safer region, Turkey will do what it can do. But I think that till the US presidency, the elections, Turkey will pursue the wait and see approach, because the elections will be a game changer in that manner.
Well, thank you. Michel, Makinsky, now we hear from our fellow panelists that the unfortunate, unintended consequence of the sanctions has been the strengthening of the more intransigent radicals
Yes.
in Iran.
Yes.
Now that obviously it's not a good,
True.
if it's happening, and the elections are coming up, as Fazle mentioned. If we have managed to make Iran more intransigent, then that makes it paradoxically more difficult, it seems to me, to engage the new Iranian leadership, whatever will emerge, in a productive fashion to lessen tensions in the region. I mean, on the one hand, we've got the the nuclear deal, but then we've got all these other matters that concerns Americans. And let's not be unrealistic here. Thousands of Americans have been killed in Iraq by improvised explosive devices, planted in Iraq by Shia militias trained by the Iranians. This is not, just a minor issue. This is something that really hurts here in Washington, not to mention the fact, and everybody knows it, but I think it's worth mentioning, people still remember the hostage crisis. Yes, it was 40 years ago. It was a long time ago. Many Americans were not born, when this happened, and yet the memory is still there. The humiliation suffered. Jimmy Carter was president, Zbigniew Brzezinski was a national security advisor, and Cyrus Vance, was Secretary of State. This looks like another geological era. And yet, believe me, the memory of that experience is still stinging. So there is a lot going on, and maybe baggage and emotions and what have you. But Michel, I'm asking you a very difficult question. We have perhaps made things worse with the Trump policy of these sanctions. Now we're going to have perhaps a more intransigent, Iranian leadership. Given these facts or probabilities, is there still some kind of an avenue for dialogue, for lessening tensions in the region, starting with Syria, which of course affects Turkey very much as well, because another neighboring state in which Turkey has considerable interests, which are certainly not aligned with the interests, I would say, of Iran. So, given all this, Michel, do you see some kind of path forward, or maybe step-by-step confidence-building measures that we could have, and that the Iranians can be convinced that, no, we're not after regime change, but we want to have some lessening of tensions, and we would like to see things improving in the region? Again, your video is gone, Michel.
Yes, I see. Trying to Zoom.
Well, we can hear you.
Okay.
But
so, in a nutshell, two things. One, the supreme leader said we will never negotiate. You have to translate it as following: we will negotiate first, but according to certain conditions. The first condition is whatever president, Biden or Trump, if an agreement is to be discussed, again, the main issue should be to allow Iran to trade and to receive money from exports. This is a red line because, again, the issue was existing before Trump and the JCPOA was not properly implemented from the US side. Second, on the nuclear issue, there is an arbitrator, the International Agency on Nuclear Issues. This body is the only one entitled to state whether Iran is complying or pursuing its nuclear hidden program. People adopting on the efficacy of the agency, this is legend. They are extremely efficient. They have all kinds of investigation too. Therefore, if we want to ascertain whether Iranian is either complying or intended to comply, we must deal with the agency. And any effort, I definitely would be to persuade whatever American leadership to rely upon the agency without feeding said agency with fake fabricated so-called proof directly imported from Tel Aviv, which is not a proper way for addressing a very complicated issue. Now, on the regional issues, again, Iran is certainly open to discuss this on Syria. This will rely upon current negotiations, which are handled mainly by Russians, but there is another group which is discussing. And the way for progressing would be to get both groups to I would say, to meet under United Nations umbrella. On Yemen, I told someone the well-known story. Zarif told in February 2017, answering a US journalist who asked him whether Iran had any strategic interest in Yemen. He answered none, because Yemen is only a tactic tool with very, very low investment, with very big return. So Yemen will be extremely easy to negotiate. On missiles, contrary to legends, the ballistic missiles can be easily discussed because the main military threat from Iran is not those missiles, but the cruise missiles, which have been extremely effective and are really dangerous. So we should clarify the real targets, the real issues, the real concerns, and then through a process of clarification handled by proper individuals and proper bodies, again, the Agency for the Nuclear Issues, we may open some room for effective discussions. But this depends on whether, if Trump is reelected, he wants a good bargain or he wants regime change. That's up to him.
Yeah, thank you. Riccardo, then back to you. Do you see, based on your obviously vast and textured experience, some kind of an opening somewhere? Again, I fully agree with what you said before, and I think it's important to clarify that the Trump administration has been particularly eager to sanction left and right almost everybody. We sanction, or we put, tariffs, on, I don't know, Canadian aluminum, which is clearly a threat to American national security, as everybody knows, because the Canadians, I don't know, are about to invade the United States, any day. They represent a serious threat to our well-being, the Canadians, right? So obviously, and and now we've got sanctions against Iran, we got sanctions against Venezuela, sanctions here, sanctions there, tariffs galore to anybody from China, where there's, there are other issues which are more legitimate, but against Korea or Europe, or because of automobiles and Japan, et cetera, et cetera. There seems to be this tendency to try to resolve every issue, with sanctions. Hopefully a Biden administration, assuming, whatever will be the outcome of the elections on November 3rd, will be different. But so, to you, Riccardo, then how does this work? I mean, can we, in this admittedly deteriorated environment, right? It's gotten worse in the last few years. Is there some kind of a path forward? Can we envisage, diplomacy and politics always being the art of the possible? Do you see anything there that would say, okay, we can start with this, maybe confidence building measures, some, minor issue that could be addressed without too much commitment and too much, risking too much political capital? Is there anything there?
Yeah,
from your perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Paolo. Very good question, because this is a core issue. I do believe that there is always a path. There is always a possibility, even in the most deteriorated condition. Looking in a historical perspective, we had many possibilities to reach an agreement I remember in 97, 99, 2003, 2005, 2009, very different Iranian political context. In 1970 up to 2005, there were the reformists. Then with Ahmadinejad, an ultra-radical, extremely anti-American. We had several possibilities to reach an agreement. A small, comprehensive dialogue. We always missed this opportunity for both sides, Iran and the West. But there are always channels and possibility. And the fact that we know Iranians are furious because Trump withdrew from the deal. And the next year we will have a conservative president. But conservative doesn't mean a lot. Because if we have a conservative like a former Pasdaran like Mr. Kalibaf, the Speaker of the Parliament, he's extremely modern, extremely open to discussion, to see if there is a possibility. For me, we have to first to wait till the Iranian election, middle of May, June 2001. Because before the election is too sensitive. Then we have to see the president, who is not so important as a matter of fact, but we can send signal and messages before, a sort of selective engagement, reopening the track 2. In the past, there were dozens of track 2, and useful or not, successful or not, but they were keeping contact with the society, with the demi-côté, with these demi-official, semi-official things. And now most of them are stopped. We can hope to have a better role from EU. As a European, I hope that Europe can, with a different American president, I don't want to say to take the lead, but to do something more. Then we know Europeans are always irrelevant. Right? That's a tradition, but we can do something. And then what is important is like after a car crash accident, you have to restart having the confidence of having the possibility to drive without trouble. Iranians, and then I'm closing my answer, the Rahbar Khamenei didn't trust the Americans, but he supported Rouhani and Mr. Zarif in closing the deal. And when Trump withdrew, he told, I told you we cannot trust American. So this is his set of mind. We have to reopen slowly, his mindset that it's possible to negotiate and to reach tactical, good agreement on specific and selected point. But if we start, or we rejoin the nuclear agreement, and then you have to discuss about the missile and the human rights and that, so that's
Okay.
That's the wrongest way possible.
So, Arzu, do you agree that it may be possible from where you are to have some kind of a small steps approach, and where perhaps, you know, Turkey's better position diplomatically, at least with Iran, may be a good, you know, instrument, like that Turkey could potentially support and help this, I mean, a good faith effort to reach some kind of maybe small agreements on smaller issues, to recreate what is, you know, confidence, you know, and at least establish a working relationship between the parties. Do you see that Turkey could perform this role in the future, maybe after the Iranian elections?
Well, regarding the Turkish-Iranian relations, in brief, I can say that those countries for hundreds of years are famous rivals. But on the other hand, these two countries know that they have common interests and common security and common economic, both threats and cooperation fields. They are very well aware of this, and they act in a manner to protect all this. They know that the unrestful in one country will have a spillover to the other side of the border. So this is important. It doesn't matter that nowadays Iran and Turkey are not agree on lots of issues in the region or other things. This is not the matter of the fact, actually. Regarding the Iranian nuclear crisis, I'm sure that Turkish government is the one who firstly wants this issue to be solved, because we have been dealing with this till 2003, and it had its impacts on Turkey from time to time. And we know that Turkey was active in some point of that period. But as I told you before, now Turkey will wait for the US president elections, and also we will see what will happen in Iran. Wait and see policy, because we have our own dynamics here, and we have to wait and see for a while to see what will happen. But I'm sure that maybe not in the short term, but in the mid-term, Turkey will be eager to be active in a process which will solve this. And regarding that, is there a possibility to do that? Yes, there's always a way. As I told at the beginning of my speech, we missed a lot of opportunity to solve this issue, a lot of opportunity, because the main issue was not solving the Iranian nuclear crisis, it was changing the Iranian regime. And it was voiced by several US leaders. I mean, as you may remember, the Condoleezza Rice first said this. We want to change the Iranian regime, and this was something big for Iran, and during the Ahmadinejad term. So you will not expect a country to sit on the same table with you when somebody says that, hey, I'm coming to change your regime. I mean, this is not a kind of solution. And we are talking about Iran. I mean, not Islamic Republic of Iran. We are talking about Iran with thousands of years history. So this is not Iraqi people saying that, hey, US, come here and change our regime. No, this will not happen in Iran. Even the people who are not in favor of the current regime will not say, okay, yes, US, come and change our regime. This is not something that they will accept. So what can be done? A more productive way to approach Iran under a new administration would be for US first to return to JCPOA and at least partially lift the sanctions, while Iran resumes its full compliance and reverse all increases in the levels of its enriched uranium, maybe gradually. the new administration should allow US companies to deal with Iran and prepare the way for dialogue on regional and other issues. But we have to give something to Iran. I mean, we are talking about carrot and sticks. You cannot just show the sticks. You have to show carrots. And once Iran did this and saying that, hey, I'm in compliance with the agreement, I'm on the table, I was waiting for the EU and the United Nations to convince the United States to eliminate the sanctions, and did nothing, but I see nothing changed, and now I began to enrich my uranium. I mean, this is the Iranian side's point of view, which is to somehow rational. Okay, but if you want to convince Iran with more stronger hardliners now, you have to give something. You have to really make confidence building measures, sitting on the table and gradually doing something.
Yeah. Thank you. Here, if I may just interject very quickly, you know, we have a hard time in the United States embracing the concept that all of you kind of alluded to, that you can and should engage with adversaries, even though you don't like them, and maybe you abhor them, because we don't like a theocratic regime. We don't like, you know, people who are ideologically inspired and think that they are the next wave for world revolution, etc. But let's not forget, you know, President Nixon and Secretary of State Henry Kissinger engaged with the Soviet Union, right? Détente, it was called. Not because all of a sudden America discovered back in the 1970s that we liked Soviet communism, but because it was considered to be of pragmatic self-interest of the United States to stabilize the world situation and try to figure out a way to create a modus vivendi with the then Soviet Union. Of course, at that point, nobody would forecast that the Soviet Union would disappear. But at the time, in the 1970s, we did repeatedly engage, and you know, and American leaders spent hundreds of hours, you know, with the likes of Leonid Brezhnev and Gromyko and all that to stabilize the world situation. And this was not because all of a sudden we decided that the Soviet leaders were nice, but because it was in our self-interest. And I think that this is something that is quite problematic still in the United States to embrace as a sort of a normative principle of diplomacy. The idea is that you don't talk to bad people, right? And that's what they are labeled, bad people. And so this makes things a lot more complicated, but that's just my own digression. I apologize for that. And the minutes we got left, I wanted to introduce, just because we don't have enough problems here, you know, another dimension to all this. And that is, you know, the maneuvering, which with some success on the part of the Trump administration, to bring together Israel and the Sunni monarchies of the Gulf, where clearly in this diplomatic maneuvering, which led to the establishment recently now, as everybody knows, of diplomatic relations between Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and Israel, that there is clearly an anti-Iranian bent, which led from behind here, although, you know, clearly by Saudi Arabia, where the obvious objective here is to create a counterweight to Iranian influence. Now, is this issue of the Sunni Arabs against Shia Iran now with the open, more or less, support of Israel, is that a complicating factor? How does that work? I mean, or is that not really a relevant issue because the key parties are those of the GCPOA, and so the Arabs are kind of, you know, kind of ancillary players? Fazle, any thought on that? We got to make this quick. I would like everybody to say something.
It's not entirely a Sunni angle. You do have Sunni countries that are very much in the intermediary process and are in a business setting process with Iran. Qatar, Oman, these are very, I mean, I wouldn't say they are making the headlines, but they do have significant weight. So there is one division within the Sunni Gulf states in itself, one that is wanting to work with Iran, the other that's taken on a much more aggressive tone, primarily because there is this feeling that I mean, particularly in the setting with Bahrain and UAE, UAE has two islands that they are contending sovereignty that they claim belongs to them, but Iran also claims the sovereignty to that. There is friction there. Bahrain believes that Iran is sending militias into its waters to overthrow its regime, so there is that sense of fear. So you do have these two countries that are very, very suspicious of Iran's activities in the region. And so I'll end up with that.
Thank you. Again, sorry, very quickly, because I'm advised we have very little time left. Michel, any thoughts on the role of the Sunni Arab monarchies in this complicated scenario?
It is adding complexity to local issues, but not to the nuclear debate. So we have to split the two topics. It remains to be seen, first of all, the size of the membership. Who will finally join? You have seen that Qatar and Oman will certainly not join. So it is not a Sunni team, but rather an Arabian, I mean a Saudi Arabian team with a target reinforcing the GCC, which is currently very weak as a strategic tool, and in the prospect of the future role of these countries as subcontractors vis-à-vis the United States. If we keep in mind that the United States are intended not to fully withdraw from the Middle East because it's stupid, but to decrease some part of the involvement, there is a clear tactic to get those states with Israeli support becoming local issues subcontractors.
Thank you. Arzu, any thoughts, since you're coming from a obviously Sunni country and Iran being Shia, and I know clearly relations with Saudi Arabia are not that great after the well-known events at the Saudi consular office in Istanbul. So how do you view this anti-Iranian coalition with in other words, does that make any difference, or is that just a complicating factor, as Michel put it?
Well, actually, not generally speaking about the Sunni world, but we can specifically talking about the Saudi Arabia and Israel regarding that issue, because those two countries are not happy with the nuclear power, with Iran with the nuclear power. I mean, Saudi Arabia has its own concerns, and Israel has its own threat perception regarding that issue. But I want to mention that another topic that we have to put on the table is Israel's nuclear program as well, because Iran saying that if you are wondering what I'm doing, so you have to look at the Israel, which has the opacity policy regarding the nuclear program. And if the second and gradual thing will be about the regional issues, this will be another matter that has to be put on the table. So I think that the United States has to convince Israel and Saudi Arabia specifically that it will negotiate with Iran, and Iran will not be a problem in the framework of an international cooperation. And after convincing them, maybe something will be happen.
Well, thank you, Riccardo. Just if you can kindly wrap it all up for us, and just to give us your final thoughts on this.
Yeah, most of the Sunni Arab countries and the monarchies and Israel opposed the agreement. They violently opposed the agreement. I don't see a lot of change, but this is not only a problem of state, it's also a problem of person. MBS, that is to say Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, extremely obsessed by Iran. MBZ in the Emirates, obsessed. Despite the fact that the Emirates are more divided, they can open up a bit. In Israel is a problem of Bibi Netanyahu, because other parts, and especially the army, is more relaxed when you speak about Iran. But in general, I do not expect in the future a support from the region in favor of any kind of agreement with Iran. And that's a problem, of course, for us and for Europe and for Mr. Biden if he's elected.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, all of you, for being so kind with your time, and thank you for being disciplined with the use of your time. I really appreciate that. I guess this is, we wrap this all up. I hear some timid, at least, but not inconsequential feelings that possibilities always exist, that diplomacy is still available, and that better days may come, but we will have to wait for some milestones, in particular, obviously, the US elections, but that will be only just in a few days, and more significantly, the Iranian elections that have been discussed earlier in the panel. To our panelists, many, many thanks for your kind contribution, and maybe we'll have to, soon enough revisit this complicated matters. I guess we, as they say, stand adjourned. Thank you very much. And thanks to the audience for following us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paolo.
Thank you.
Thank you.